Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdsson, World Alternative Media here, and we are joined by the one and only David Icke. First of all, thank you very much for joining us, sir.
Pleasure, mate.
Excellent. So I wanted to ask you about something that's been very prevalent in the media lately, which is this idea of QAnon, and I wanted to get your thoughts on whether you think this might be a psyop, because it's this whole idea of staying apathetic, trust the plan, wait and see, will Donald Trump get elected again? Maybe we'll just wait for that. And meanwhile, you have this, they claim Hillary Clinton and all these people are going to be in Guantanamo Bay in January, but what happens in January? Roger Stone gets arrested. So what are your thoughts on this QAnon theory? Is it a psyop or is it legitimate?
We have a word in England which I think encapsulates this whole theme, and the word is bollocks. You know, I've been on this road a long time, and I see the cycles, and this is a cycle that I've seen. When I was in North America, way back in the 90s, on this road when no one wanted to know then, people were telling me basically the same story, that the good guys, because, you know, it's like Hitler said, keep your bloody propaganda simple. The good guys are going to arrest the bad guys, right? And there's all the good guys are getting together in the military and the intelligence, and they're going to arrest the bad guys. And you know, every now and again you get given a date, which I don't put in my diary, by the way, because it passes. And I've come across this so many times. It's ridiculous. It's just like a recurring pattern. Oh, what shall we call it this time? And it just repeats itself. And you know, if you look at I'll give you an analogy of what this is about, or in part what it's about. In Israel, we have had, Israel-Palestine, we have had a long period of talks about talks, roadmaps, talks about roadmaps, roadmaps about talks. And so it's gone on. And it never got anywhere. You know why? It was never meant to. What has it been doing? Buying time. And as that time has elapsed, more and more illegal settlements have been built in Palestinian land, to the point where there's two-state solution, which is what people say, oh, I believe in a two-state solution. Excuse me, have you seen what's going on? There aren't two states. Because the time has been bought to make a two-state solution impossible. So now what are they saying now? Oh, well, a one-state solution. Yeah, that's all along, right? So when you have these cycles of this, the good guys are going to arrest the bad guys, it's buying time. Oh, well, I don't really have to do anything then, because they're going to arrest the bad guys. And so it goes on. You know, and it's just, in many ways, an excuse to do nothing. You know, I got involved, I leave it alone usually, but there was one, I won't go into the people involved, although I've mentioned them in my books, where they kept giving the date of when the good guys were going to arrest the bad guys, right? And it was on a radio show and stuff. And the guy had this fella on who was anonymous. We can't say who it is because, you know, he'll be in danger, but he's going to tell us how the good guys are going to arrest the bad guys and when they're going to do it. Well, hold on a second. First of all, he was on the bloody phone, right? Right? So they can't work out where he is when he's on the phone for 2 hours to a radio show, right? So please. But you are going to arrest the bad guys and you tell them the date. I mean, come on. I'm sitting there going, I'm going to wake up in a minute. Pinch me. Ouch. No, it's real. And, of course, the date passed. And what do they do? They give another date. That date passed. And years later, we're still waiting. So it's just a recurring theme. And please don't let people fall for it, because it's just buying time. Get involved. Get engaged. You know, the cavalry's not coming over the over the horizon. We are the bloody cavalry.
And apathy so often begets dependence, and dependence is exactly what any government in the world would want. Their subjects to be on their knees begging them to help them and solve the problems they created. And we're seeing similar things in places like Venezuela, which of course had a tyrannical government, but also has been manipulated by the US government. But now Trump announces this guy Juan Guaido as the legitimate leader of Venezuela, who 80% of Venezuelans had never heard of, worked under a guy from the IMF, and the first thing he does is ask for an IMF loan. I mean, these faceless movements seem to be popping up all over the world in times of great struggles. What do you think about this entire phenomenon?
Well, I mean, Venezuela is the most blatant United States coup on a country in history, really. And think of the competition. There've been enough of them. And, you know, when people, you know, when I say that a few people are manipulating events, I mean, today you can point this out so clearly. You had the Project for the New American Century group formed in the 1990s that produced the document in September 2000 listing a series of countries in the Middle East and elsewhere they wanted to regime change. And then because of 9/11, which was the excuse they wanted, they started attempting and picking off these regime changes on the list, like Libya and Syria they tried, and Iran they want, and Iraq, etc. And then all these years later, you look at the Trump administration, and Trump, of course, one of the things he said in his campaign is he wanted to stop having American government and military interfering in the affairs of other countries. Well, I think he must have forgotten that bit. So now they've deleted the nuclear agreement with Iran because they want that to kick off, because that's on the list. And it had gone quiet because there was this nuclear agreement. You know, the regime changing there and justifying it was now a problem. So what happens? They drop the nuclear deal and bring the conflict in. Well, where I'm going with this is, of course, the National Security Advisor, John Bolton, the psychopath who's never seen a country he didn't want to invade, as long as he weren't there. If he was at the front line when the first bullet was fired, he'd be under a bed in Washington when the second one went off. These people are just cowards. They want other people to do their business. Anyway, he's driving now the demonization of Iran. He's driving the demonization of Venezuela. And John Bolton was a stalwart of the Project for the New American Century back in the 90s, which started this process of regime change in the Middle East. And then who does Trump make a special envoy to Venezuela recently when it started to kick off? Special envoy to the Venezuelan coup, he should be called, but Elliot Abrams, who is from the Project for the New American Century, a man with a grotesque history of being involved in mass killings of people in Central America on behalf of the terrorist American government under whichever party, just the same. And so you see the patterns, and you see how the same personalities keep popping up. It's so blatant. And this is
So we should all just trust the plan and wait for something to happen.
yeah, let's do that. Yeah, I reckon that John Bolton's going to be arrested by the good guys. I'll tell you when. I'll look at my diary. No, please. But this point is another pattern. Number one, you want to see, if you keep invading countries like Iraq, if you keep doing it, then people see the pattern. Hey, they're invading someone else. So the best way to avoid that pattern being seen, in other words, that you're picking off countries according to a script, is to get the public in that country to regime change for you. And this is what's called a people's revolution. This is what the Arab Spring was all about. What was benefiting Arabs? Look what's happened to them as a result of the Arab Spring. In Egypt, they've got rid of a tyrant, and now they've got a military junta running the place. I mean, oh yeah, Arab Spring, yeah, we're all free now. Because it was never meant to be that. But this is the pattern. There's a network called the Open Society Foundations, which are massively funded to the tune of tens of billions by George Soros. And they specialize in many things, but they specialize in creating unrest, training and funding and developing agitators to start protest movements. They've done it in Ukraine, they've done it all over the place. Did it in the Arab Spring. Some of these Open Society Foundation executives have bragged to people who've gone public with it about the fact that they were the people that started the agitation in Libya against Gaddafi. So another part of this is to then target the country with sanctions, which is what they're doing to Iran, it's what they're doing to Venezuela. Because what do sanctions do? Sanctions create economic deprivation. And what does that do? It starts to get unrest in the country because people are economically deprived. They wonder, where their food's coming from. And so you're building this unrest through sanctions and through agitation. And then what you do, and I've gone into this in the books. A lot of people don't maybe realize this, but George Soros was absolutely centrally involved in changing, before this whole Arab Spring started, in changing, which the UN eventually agreed to, the definition of sovereignty. The definition of sovereignty before was the government of the country, right? So if you wanted to send the boys into a country, right, invade it, whatever, you were invading the sovereignty of that country. What Soros did, he started it all off. It's all in my books. And then the UN had a vote and agreed to it. Is sovereignty became the people of the country, which means now they can say, the sovereignty of the country, the people, are being abused by their government. So we're going in now, send the boys in, to protect the sovereignty of the people. So they're over this breaking the sovereignty. So this is how it works when you put it all together. Soros's networks go in, they start the agitation. The sanctions are targeting the country to create more deprivation. And then the American government says, oh, the country are deprived. Yeah, because of you buggers, overwhelmingly. And therefore, we've got to do something to protect the people. And then when the point is reached where the agitation starts, and this is why they brought this Guado guy in as a focal point to create the unrest against the government, then they eventually, if they need to, the neocons come in. The neocons come in, your Boltons and your neocon stalwarts through the military, and then there's a military intervention. This is what happened, of course, classically in Libya. You had the Soros networks create the agitation and the unrest in Libya, and then they said he's killing his own people, and then they send the boys in, NATO and America and Britain. And this is what is happening, and that tells you something that a lot of people don't realize. That George Soros, who is supposed to be the godfather of the left, and the neocons of the right, they answer to the same masters. His organization, Soros' organization, creates the groundwork. The neocons send the troops in. And this is how it works. And this is what we're seeing in Venezuela. And if Venezuela doesn't go quietly, in other words, it doesn't fall to a people's revolution, then there's a very good chance that they'll send the military in.
And they'll end up like a Libya or a Yemen or all the other countries that the U.S. has destroyed.
What I'm always doing, I'm looking for patterns. You look at the patterns in South America now. far right. You've got a far right president in Brazil, pro-America, pro-Israel. Same in Colombia, and now they're targeting Venezuela. And what you'll see as this goes on, they're going to start targeting Bolivia, which is basically an anti-American government.
And there's so many problems with this deception of Donald Trump. I mean, there's always a deception. They always have to follow one deception by another in order to keep their entire empire working and upright. And we see that with, you know, Donald Trump dropping or looking to drop more bombs than Obama did. And again, if Trump was the inside or the outsider that came in to destroy the establishment, he'd have a bullet in his head by now. But I wanted to finally ask you about, are you optimistic about the future? Are you optimistic that there is a great awakening despite the attempted distractions by the media off and on throughout the world?
Oh, well, yes, I am. And I'm seeing it all the time. More and more people are questioning the world, they're questioning reality, they're questioning events, they're not taking the official narrative without question. Of course, still the great majority do, but nothing like the majority that, you know, I've been on this road a long time. I remember what it was like 30 years ago. Cool, dear. I mean, you were really struggling to find many people who would be open to looking at the world that way. Now it's massive compared with that. So we are moving along, and you know, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact, because I travel all the time and you meet people, you see what is happening away from the microphones and away from the cameras. See, the official narrative of everything basically dominates the camera and dominates the microphones. That's what's pounded out 24/7 through the mainstream media. It's pounded out through politics. The official version of everything, and you can get the impression that there is a belief, a massive belief in the official narrative, because that's all people hear. But when you travel and you talk to people in all different cultures around the world, there is a very different mentality out there that is not seeing the world through the lens of the official narrative. And, you know, it's incredibly encouraging to see and chat with people and see just how streetwise they're becoming about the world. I mean, we've got in Britain the big thing about Brexit going on, leaving the European Union. And that's a classic because the referendum 2 years ago voted to come out of the European Union, which is the last thing that the European Union cabal and the hidden hand behind it wanted. So they spent 2 years now trying to thwart it, to stop it happening. And what this has done has actually streetwised people, especially you know, those that voted to come out, but other people too who voted to stay in, but having watched the events of the last 2 years have gone, well, hold it, if we had another referendum, I'd vote to come out, because they're starting to see how the will of the people and the so-called democratic will of the people is basically ignored if it doesn't fit the direction that they want the world to go. So and the more that this Orwellian society, a global society, starts to break the surface, which it has to do if it's going to become reality, the more it's not a sometime over the rainbow esoteric concept. It's actually in your face. And the reason I started out on basically an ongoing open-ended world speaking tour in 2016 was because I saw that how people were feeling uneasy about the world, uneasy about what was happening. But obviously, if you haven't done the research, you can't really put words to it. So I'm incredibly optimistic, but we have a hell of a challenge, that's for sure. But I'm glad we're where we are now, and not where we were 30 years ago when when I set out, because if the awakening of people was still at 1990 levels, then basically it would be game, set, and match by now.
We just can't get distracted. We have to keep our eyes on the goal where we're heading this whole time. We can't allow ourselves to be distracted and pulled into these crazy faceless movements that attempt to basically keep us apathetic and dependent. That's always the end of the story. So anyway, I really appreciate you talking with us today. Can you just tell everyone where, if they somehow don't know, where they can find your books and all your work and support the work you do?
Yeah, they can find the books and everything at davidicke.com, and of course there's the news is on there every day from a different perspective of the official narrative. And I've got a film coming out called Renegade, which is going to be out in April, May. And there's some premieres. There's one in New York and one in Toronto and one in Los Angeles. One in Manchester and one in London in late March, so I hope that this, and I think it will. It's a movie about my life, but my life is just the theme. It's absolutely chock-a-block with information about how the world's manipulated, and I hope that it will get a lot of people who are new to this. To see that the world's not like they thought it was, because the more the merrier on that score, for sure.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for joining us.